you wanted the best, you've got the best podcast. The hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show, the preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. The CEOs, authors, thought leaders, visionaries, and motivators. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
I'm Chris Voss here from the ChrisVossShow.com. Ladies and gentlemen, there are at least things that makes you feel sure. Welcome to the big show. The Chris Voss Show is the family that loves you but doesn't judge you, at least not as harshly as everyone else does in your family, because you're probably like me, the black sheep of your family, and everyone gives you that side eye and those dirty looks over Thanksgiving and Christmas dinners. But, it gives you something to do in life, disappointing your family. Keep rolling with it. Get them on your good side, though. Maybe refer them to the show or bring them to the dark side, I guess. I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm just rambling, making it up again. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, LinkedIn.com/Chris Voss. Chris Voss won the TikTokity, and they can experience the Chris Voss Show glow as well and become educated, and then they'll be so darn smart you'll have somebody you can talk to over turkey, instead of arguing over whether or not the stuffing is made right. Today we have an amazing author on the book. The stuff I make up. Today we have an amazing author on the show. We're going to be talking about his journey. He's a multi-book author. He's a musician, and he is an audiophile of music, and he does consulting and coaching, and we're going to talk about some music therapy through music, which is good because, I use Metallica for a lot of my depression and anytime I need to get stuff done. But after a good headbanging and Metallica, you feel better. You get all that anger out, misery, and you just feel clean. So there's therapy to it too, folks. We may be able to help some people with the show. He's the author of the latest books that came out in October 22nd, 2021. Moments in Time, stories about artists and songs of the 50s. 60s and 70s for fans of music from a music fan. Tom Locke will be joining us in the show, and he has a second book in that series as well for Moments in Time, where they talk about great music and everything else that went into it, because there was a lot of great music in that time period that was great. Don't get me started on the music of today. Get off my lawn, you kids. So there's that. Tom Locke is a gentleman who was raised in Toronto. He moved to Vancouver in 1984 and began working in the film and entertainment industry. He had the opportunity to work alongside like-minded individuals and play an integral role in creating a billion-dollar industry for British Columbia. My favorite band, Rush, probably came out of that, and probably so did, what's the band that everyone hates that's from Canada, other than Justin Bieber? Nickelback. Anyway, I'm really just doing jokes, folks. In 1995, Tom founded Rainmaker Digital Pictures Corporation. Prior to this, he was president and CEO of Gastown Post and Transfer, and he provided a complete range of digital post-production services for national and international film and video producers. Some of his TV projects that he worked on post-producing included 21 Jump Street, The X-Files, and Millennium. And over the feature film side of the business, Tom had pleasure working on services for Legends of the Fall with Brad Pitt, if you remember that movie. What a great movie that was. Won an Academy Award for cinematography. And over the past 25 years, he studied and consulted on the impact of digital technology in business and introduced the online world to his music creation Moments in Time books and created a wall down memory lane. Welcome to the show. How are you, Tom?
I'm great, Chris.
It's wonderful to have you, Tom. I know we probably have a delay because you're in Canada, right? Let's go. I'll just finish everything with A and a boot. Tom, give us your .coms. Where do you want people to find you on the interwebs?
You can find me in a couple of spots. Certainly as it relates to my books, that's www.mitstories.com. Obviously, the MIT standing for Moments in Time. So that's mitstories.com. My books are available on Amazon worldwide. In terms of my consulting business, and that you can get me at hubcs.com. That's hub, HUBCS, stands for consulting services.com. So that's my other website there.
There we go. So give us a 30,000 overview of what's inside your books, your two books on this series.
I think interesting is how they came about. For a number of years, I was, just loving music. It was an escape for me from my business day. So let's be right up front. The beautiful thing about music, it can be played, you could be doing something else. The last thing I wanted to do, because of my background in the film and entertainment industry, was watch another piece to be edited on a screen. So it was a great escape for me. And over the period of time, I got this idea. Do you remember a guy by the name of Paul Harvey?
Yes, I love Paul Harvey. I grew up with
Paul Harvey came out of Chicago, and the rest of the story. It was beautiful. It was beautiful. It was a syndicated show. And so one day, like you, Chris, I think of ideas at night, and music is a key to me. And I'm driving along. I said, what if we had a Paul Harvey type thing about music? In other words, the guy gets on in the morning, it's your drive to or your drive home, and he throws these tidbits of information out. You don't know where he's coming from. He breaks for a commercial, comes back, tells you the rest of the story, and then plays the tune. What a neat idea.
Yeah,
nice 5-minute piece.
Yeah, and I love that because like there's some music that's so good, I never learned the words of what the hell the songs are about. So an example is like Steely Dan. And Steely Dan, we've had Steely Dan's producer on the show for Asia, and I think he did the one thereafter. And he produced like Barbra Streisand, Dire Straits. I mean, you name it. And through the 70s, he was like the god. I think he's named the godfather of recording producers. But, Steely Dan, the music was so good for 20 or 30, 20, 25 years. How old am I? I never knew much about the lyrics. I kind of knew the lyrics, but I didn't really have a clue what the hell they were talking about because a lot of Steely Dan stuff is ambiguous. And I didn't know why they wrote the songs. And so finally, after 20 years, I started sitting down with the lore of their music and what I'm like, what are they? Finally, I'm like, really need to learn what these lyrics are about. What's a Book of Knobber, And so I started, Wikipediaing this sort of stuff. And I was just entranced. I was like, holy crap, I've been singing lyrics about something I had no idea this is what it's about, And so the history of this, how the songs are written. And what's really great is a lot of artists are getting online now. I've been watching a lot of Stuart Copeland from the Police getting online and just talking about how they made the Police and how everything happened. And it's just so rich and adds a fabric or adds to the tapestry of the fabric of their music that once you understand, the data and the stories. And so you compiled those in your books so that people have these stories. And I believe there's some interviews in them as well.
There is. And it's interesting you mentioned that because when you play a song and you get appreciation of the background is one thing, but the other thing is the trigger of the memory. Where were you when that song was played? What happened at that time in your life when that song came out? And those are big selling factors in today's world, strangely enough. As we've mentioned in business many times in a lot of places I spoke, timing is a wonderful thing. So when I came up with this crazy idea, I took it to my friends in Nashville. And I said, hey, I want you to listen to these 5-minute spots I written. This is 1986, okay, 1986. So this isn't something that's happened overnight. So it's 1986. I take these 5-minute spots down, have a demo of 5 songs. And I take them to a place where a company called Film House, who do at that time, all the video commercials for radio stations. You remember those? C-Car, boom, they, bop in the song. So he had his clients, he had his people inside, and they're listening to him. And they came back to me and said, no, Tom, these won't work because we want shows. We want Casey Kasem's top 40. We want Dick Clark's 3-hour show. So we can just pencil those into the show and we're done. So I threw them in my bag and I kept them on the shelf till about 1990, 95, 97. I sat down with a former A&R guy with A&M Records, a gentleman who discovered Bryan Adams. His name is Michael Godin. We became good friends, and Michael says, I think this internet thing's going to work, and we're going to put music on that show, and I'm going to put a show on there, and he has. It's called Treasure Island Oldies. It's been on for 27 years. He started it in 1997, and about 3 years in, about 2000, I came to him. I said, hey, Michael, I wrote these things, back at this idea in the 70s, produced it in the 80s, and went nowhere. What do you think about a 5-minute show? and we'll do this, and then you play the record. Well, he loved the idea. Plus, I brought a sponsor in with me, so that certainly helped. And we've been doing them for 27 years. I do one every Sunday night for him.
Wow.
And so what happened was his audience, which international, says, Tom, you got to put these in a book. These would be really cool. And, you got other things going. I'm consulting. I'm doing other stuff. So I was on the side of my desk because music was an escape. I didn't want to turn this into, real work. But then COVID hit. So COVID was a big thing for me because I wasn't going anywhere. And I got a chance to put these in a book. But then you had to take a look at the target group and where you're going. So this is to me the key part. That USP people talk about, that unique selling principle. What could I do and convey? What could I make my book different? It's not just another book on music. And heaven knows there's a plethora of them out there. So the key was, how am I going to write this? So the Paul Harvey idea was there. So I'm going to write them as a mystery and then finish off at the end. And then, but all the stories are only going to be 2 pages. So because again, attention span of newts in today's world. So I picked something up from the younger generation.
Yeah.
So I write these, and then with my technology background, I'm going, I want instant gratification, like it was on the radio. So what I've done in the book, and I think I pioneered this, the first book I know in the world it's done this way. The stories are 2 pages. When you turn over to the second page, you get down to the far corner, there's a QR code. You put your smart camera over the QR code, leads you to the song. You can hear it.
Oh, wow. So you've tied, like, that was the problem I had. I mentioned earlier that I would Wikipedia stuff, or I'd Google the lyrics, I mean, with Steely Dan, what was the song? The Fez? I didn't know what a Fez was. For a long time, I thought it was a hat. Turns out it was a condom. And I had no idea. I was just like, what? And here I've been singing this song for 20 years. Probably people sitting around going, why are you singing do you know what this song's about? And, it's a fun, artsy song about that. But the fact that you've tied the stories to the music where you can listen to the music, kind of what you're recreating, you can correct me if I'm assessing this wrong, but one of the things that you and I used to do in our age with growing up with albums, LPs, there were these giant pieces of artwork, and you didn't have the internet, so you couldn't look up, what was going on with the band, blah, 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 blah. The only real communication you have from the band was the LP, the music, and the cover, and the liner notes, I suppose, if there were pictures or if it was a gatefold that would fold out. But that was your whole connection to the band. And so you would get the album, you'd run home, you'd put on the record player, and then you would sit and I would read the notes, I'd read the lyrics, I'd even read who the producers were and the engineers were, because there was a lot of great I forget the big master audio mastery guys. I think it was Bill Graham, or there was, anyway, you look at the producers, and you just that was your whole thing. I remember one of my first albums I ever got a hold of was Billy Joel's 52nd Street. And I think I've looked at every microcosm of that picture, the dirt on the road, the dirt on the street, his attitude, his look, the back of the presentation and the songs. And you're like, do the songs interweave with the cover? And, what's the messaging here? And so people love that sort of immersion in the experience of not only listening to the music, but, and that's how we used to consume it. And then suddenly, the artwork got smaller to where it just became almost worthless, and people didn't really care. It seemed like for a while there about putting out good artwork. And, I think people are going back to that. We talked before the show. LPs they kind of went down for a while, and then they've kind of stayed steady, and now they're just great collector's items. I just spent, I think, about $1,000 about 6 months ago buying a whole mess of LPs that I threw away years ago.
Oh yeah.
What do you think about that? Have I done a good assessment of what you're doing in the book?
Yeah, in the book, it's really giving that background of the story, or setting up a situation that you're familiar with. Example: everybody's gone to weddings. and you're waiting for the speeches to get over. You're having dinner. And if that DJ doesn't get us out on the floor in the third dance, then, there's something wrong here.
The DJ's
totally. Yeah. So I would talk about a story about, hey, you're at a wedding, go over and you can't tell me you didn't hear this song. So they're trying to figure out which song would be playing at a wedding. I go through and tell the story. A good example is Tommy James's Money Money. I did that in the first book.
Money Money.
And then
Billy Joel covered that, or Billy Idol covered that.
Billy Idol. But the interesting thing is about that story, just as an example, a lot of people don't know how he got the name.
Oh.
Money Money. So as the story goes, he's editing it in the studio. He's with Richie Cordell, another big talent. They're sitting there and he's going, I got to come up with a name like Shirley or something like that. And he goes out in the balcony and it's in Manhattan, looks up the street. In the building, it says Mutual of New York, MONY.
Holy crap, that's where it came from?
Yeah.
That's funny.
So that's the type of stories I write in the book. So there's a lot of surprises in the book that way.
Those stories bring to life the song. Like there's so many times where I've looked at songs one way, I gave the Fez example, and there's so many songs like that, or you see how they hear like this. One of the stories Stuart Copeland tells is the beginning of the Police's song. It's the famous one. It was the lead off in 48 Hours where Eddie Murphy's sitting there singing Roxanne, the red light. And when you listen to the song, there's this funky piano key hit. I think there's 2 or 3 notes that get hit, and then there's a laughter. And, you sit and you listen to the song, and for I was like 11 or 10 when I started listening to the Police, and I'm 57 now, so 40 years or some odd, I've been thinking that was planned. Wow, that was a brilliant engineering move. Turns out it was just Sting. They started recording, and Sting accidentally sat down on the piano, bonked a bunch of keys with his butt, and then he laughed about it. And they just thought it was so cool, they left it in. And you're just like, holy crap, what a story. Like all this time for 40 years, I never knew that. And it just adds magic to when you listen to it again. So the stories
because you'll think about that. I assure you, next time you hear Money Money, you're going to think about the Mutual in New York.
I will. I'll be like, hey, I'll be telling people. So I'll be like,
another good example of that one is when Buddy Holly did Every Day, and you'll hear the drum, and it's kind of interesting, but it wasn't drums at all. Jerry Allison played his blue jeans with his hands. That's the background in Every Day.
I think one of the story that I always recall is the guys who did the song In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida, and I'm not sure I'm going to get the name right. And I think it happened with the Beatles too, where they were jamming, and the engineer or the soundboard guy, the producer, whatever, he said, hey, I'm going to take a break. I'm going to get some food or go to the bathroom or something. And they accidentally left the recording studio on because they were jamming. And so he didn't turn off the recording. So they were still playing. The band had no idea. And I think this happened to Beatles too. The band had no idea that the recording was still going. And so they just kind of relaxed and they did this jam that is In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida. And the only reason it's recorded and become a hit is because the engineer actually left the recording on. They captured it and went, holy shit, you got a song there. And I don't think they had a song before that was hitting. And
no, it was supposed to be In the Garden of Eden.
Yeah. And they're just making up the lyrics and stuff, but it was crazy. And so you hear about stuff like that and you're like, wow. And there's so much of this magic that goes into music that isn't planned. That's the beauty of it is the improvisational of it and the stuff.
It's very true. And a lot of people, and some of the songs you put out there, again, it gets back to that moment in time for them. That's why them. And it really is a magical period for people. And it can be magical in different ways for different people. That's what excites me about music, just the way your mind works with it.
Yeah. And so let's get into some of the things we kind of teased out on therapy. How can music be used in therapy and stuff, and how do you do that work?
It's a great question. About 4 or 5 months ago, got up in the morning, was watching TV here in Vancouver, and a doctor came on, Dr. Sarah Faber. She works out of SFU, Simon Fraser University here in Vancouver, and she's a musical therapist. And I went, isn't this interesting? So I phoned her up, told her what I was doing, and I shared with her what I did at an adult community center back in Eastern Canada in Ontario, where I went in and I spoke to a group of people with the age range of 60 to 100. And going in, the guy said, geez, we may only be able to get about a half an hour out of these people. I said, it's no problem. I can shorten or lengthen it. We'll just see what the response is like. And it's an interactive presentation. I get the audience, interacting and contributing. Anyway, the short story is an hour and 15 minutes later, we're still there, and everybody in the room is taken over telling stories about, I had that record album. I used to play this. I used to play that. And it really struck a chord with me. Plus, I lived through Alzheimer's with my father, and I found that music ended up being our connection. So I've repurposed, where I want to go with the visions with these books in my giving back frame of mind, in doing stuff at adult community centers and also with the aged and people who are, starting to lose it a bit, if you will, the marketplace. And the great thing about music, we're talking about it here today, Chris, it puts a smile on people's face. Yeah. You can't beat that.
Yeah, you can't beat it at all. And you're right. It's been shown, music has been shown to help Alzheimer's. I don't know if you watch who's the gentleman who wrote "I Left My Heart" in San Francisco, the crooner.
Tony Bennett.
Tony Bennett. And I watched a documentary of Tony Bennett, and he was, disappearing into Alzheimer's at the time. And they were finding that, he'd be lost most of the time. But if they put him on stage and played his songs for him, his brain would immediately connect, and he would start performing the songs. And it would bring him back. And there's people on the spectrum, on autism, that I've seen that they have a hard time functioning with everything, but if they play music or interact with music, it opens them up. It brings them out. And, it's really interesting. I've had times in my life where I've suffered depression or stress. You feel stress. I joked at the beginning of the show, and it's true. I mean, not everyone's a fan of heavy metal and Metallica, but if I'm stressed and kind of, feel a little bit overwhelmed, I can listen to Metallica and I can kind of vent the anger and the misery and the beat of the music. And then when I get done, I feel good. I almost feel like I went through a therapy session. I feel
fresh. It sounds like a workout.
Relieved. Yeah, you can use it for workouts too. I have a gym playlist that I use. And, sometimes you go to the gym and you're just like, I don't want to go. I feel beat up. I don't feel like doing the lifting all these weights, beating on my body. But I've got a music playlist. And so the beautiful part is, as soon as I start that playlist, my brain kicks into gear and goes, let's lift some weights. We can do this. Rah, rah, rah. And, you've got that cheerleader championing music in the background. It's really...
I do the same. The same.
Yeah, it's really the enticement of the fabric of our life, really, that music brings. I can't imagine a world without music.
No, me neither.
Yeah. Plus, you wouldn't have any books to write, so that would be kind of something. So, tell us about some of the other consulting work that you do, coaching work that you do through using music as well.
Well, after my days directly in the film and entertainment industry, I branched out on my own and started my own consulting practice early 1996. And what I saw was there was a need in our industry, the direct industry, in the film and entertainment industry, for some type of, I don't want to call it sophistication, but business know-how in terms of running businesses in order to quote something from one of your latter shows, to build some muscle in businesses, and so for sustainability, because it's about show business and the emphasis on business. So I might often be referred to, even though I have a creative background, as a suit in the business, because I happen to understand finance and stuff really well and how business and numbers work. But I was working more with the people in the businesses who may started out as a 1 or 2 man pop shop, and all of a sudden now they got 10 employees, all of a sudden they got 20 employees, And you can't put your arm around a guy and take him out for a beer, every night, or you're going to be an alcoholic before the month's out. So how can I, teach some of the backgrounds and to give them some assistance in running their business, knowing that they need some structure, but you're in a creative environment. I created something called Creating Your Competitive Edge. And I worked a lot with the people in the industry, a lot at the C level, because as brought out in many of your podcasts, it's lonely at the top. Somebody's got to talk to somebody, right? And so I got involved doing that and did often a lot of one-on-one with people, and peeling back the onion so they knew who the hell they were. Because how can you sell yourself if you don't know yourself? So these are the type of things I was doing.
Oh, wow. And some of the offerings that you have on your website, feel free to plug that .com again. And what are some of the offerings have? What should people be reaching out for you if they're listening in the audience that you can help them with?
I think if it's a case, books, if it's just pure pleasure, music, it's there. In terms of, consulting and that's very much an individual thing. Some people will write, hey, I need some focus group work with my management team. So I may, talk to them a little bit about that. But it really caters to the individual. And I may not be the guy, but I'm pretty well connected in the marketplace to say, here's a guy you should talk to. Here's where you can go. So being a connector is a big thing. It's on my business card for my hub thing. It says bringing people and ideas together. That's what I do. I'm a serial entrepreneur in a lot of things. I've worked in a lot of different projects and always have something, on the go that is going to be something where I'm going to learn something from it. I really believe in lifelong learning. I think that's what keeps you young, and that's what keeps you relevant.
Yeah, definitely. And music is, like I said, it just seems endless. Like I'm enthralled. It's popular on YouTube. I don't know if you've ever created a YouTube channel in these stories, but there's people doing that and doing the interviews.
Yeah,
and of course,
I'm being pushed to do that now, and it makes total sense. I think after proving the credibility of the second book, which is coming along fine, it'll be time in the new year that I will do that, and with a sensitivity to that. It's got to be impactful. You don't want to take up a lot of people's time, and you want them coming back. No different than the way you've positioned your show so well over the years.
Yeah, it's and it's enthralling. I think there was the lyrics, talking about the lyrics, what they mean. I've started to go through and review lyrics on stuff that I've listened to for 20 years, and I'm like, wait, this song's about something completely different that I had no idea. Wow, okay, all right. This song has a whole different meaning. Like I've been singing about this song, and people have probably been looking at me going, does he know what this song means? Yeah,
it's funny you say that, because I'm a big fan of lyrics and how some people can convey something in 2 lines, that you would take 1,000 words of dialogue from someone else. I take my hat off to them, how they can do that. Yeah. Some of the lyrics are just phenomenally simple, but elegant, just beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And they just have such a dimension, because, some of the songs, I've listened to ad nauseum to a point that you're just like, I'm really sick of this song, but it's kind of cool. But, some of the songs, some of my favorite band, like I'm a big Rush fan. You're in Canada.
Yeah, I'm actually right now trying to be in contact with Geddy Lee, because I grew up where Geddy grew up. I grew up in Willowdale in Toronto, mm-hmm. So I grew up with him. Geddy's about 71 now. Yeah. So he's getting there.
Yeah.
Good guy.
And they seem like such a wonderful group of men, and I'm still getting over Neil Peart passing.
With Geddy, what you see is what you get, and you probably know he's a phenomenal baseball fan. I don't know if you know that.
He just put out a baseball book that's like crazy.
Yeah. And when I was in Kansas City in 2015, doing a tour, going through all ballparks. I played ball my whole life. It's my favorite sport, believe it or not. And I'm in 2015. I go, the Jazz Museum. I got to go see the Jazz Museum in Kansas City, and right beside it is the Negro League's Baseball Hall of Fame. Oh. So what a beautiful two birds with one stone. Love it. In I go go through the Negro Leagues Baseball Hall of Fame. Goes James Earl Jones is doing the intro and beautiful, video piece on the history of the Negro Leagues. I go around the corner, and they have this mock-up play field set up. They got Satchel Paige on the mound, and cool Papa Bell at third base. So they have all these great Negro players there. Mm-hmm. In the right field stands, sitting in the stands, there's not people mock-ups, but there's baseballs. Mm-hmm. Baseballs signed by Negro League players. There's about 150 of them roughly there. I go by and I'm looking at all these. I think I know that. Don't know that guy. Don't know that guy. But they're all there. There's a plaque at the bottom of it, and it says, "Donated by Geddy Lee."
Oh, wow. Yeah. He's got a huge baseball collection. I've seen that. And then he just put out a baseball book. But he's really becoming great at telling stories. So I hope you get an interview with him. We'd like to have him on the show. So if you
I'm to bring him. I'm a supporter of the Canadian Baseball Hall of Fame. And we want to get Geddy to come out this summer to be with us. And that would be terrific.
Maybe? Yeah.
Yeah, we could do that. He's already done it at the Blue Jay games a few times. So
yeah, I've seen him sing.
He's a season ticket holder there.
Yeah. As long as he doesn't come out and sing, the Bob and Doug song, "Take Off to the Great White North." That's not a very good Canadian anthem. It's a great song, though. I love it. But I'm a huge Rush. So anyway, the thing I was saying about Rush is I've played Rush ad nauseum, and there was a point where I had to take a break because, I just consumed it to the point of just being burnt out on it. And, I had to take a break and then come back. But delving into the lyrics, and, I've seen Geddy and Alex. Geddy does a lot of interviews now. He was on, I think it's AMS or AWS. It's a music channel that's on cable. And the great Dan Rather does a lot of interviews on there. And he's such a great interviewer. Mm-hmm. But he's, and so hearing some of the stories behind the song, when Neil Peart passed, going back and watching his videos, talking about his artwork, and just really paying more attention to what he was doing and stuff just changes your perception of the music, and it brings a whole new life to sometimes when you're burnt out on your music and stuff. Yeah.
Well, Geddy put out 2 books last year. One of them I suggest people read. I read it because it was more about him personally growing up. It's only 60 pages long, and it's got Geddy Lee biography. And it talks about his parents, coming over, how he got the name Geddy because his mother couldn't pronounce Gary. It's kind of neat.
It's funny as hell, isn't it?
Yeah. But it's beautifully written. And of course, it meant a lot to me, beautifully written, because I grew up in Willowdale. I grew up, near where he was. And to see a group come out of there we used to see at the local high school and, rise up. Pardon the pun, but it was quite a rush.
Yeah, quite a rush. Now, was that My Effing Life that came out last year about this time? Was that the book?
Yeah. Well, there was 2. Yeah, about this time, you're correct. One was like his memoirs about the touring and stuff. It was quite a large book. The other one's about 67 pages, as a matter of fact. Takes you about 2 or 3 hours to read, but it's really personal about home, and it just meant a lot to me. I really fell for the guy. The guy's the real deal. What else can I tell you?
The thing about Canadians is you folks are so wonderful up there and so nice and so polite and so civil. Down here we're just a drunken mess of American idiots, and you guys are stuck with us. But you guys are so wonderful up there, and you guys seem to have a more basic sense of life, and you guys, it's just different, and you guys are just better than us, really, when it comes down to it. But if you're referring to My Effing Life, it's the book that has a picture of him probably in high school or at the 70s with the long hair.
Yeah, that's not the book. The other one's just called the biography. Yeah.
Now there's a Geddy's Lee Big Beautiful Book of Bass, and then there's some baseball ones that he's put out. There's a huge baseball one he just basically published. But if you get a chance to listen to My Effing Life, the one he put out last year, you want to listen to the audiobook, because Alex gets on the audiobook. And it's way more. Oh. Yeah, it's way funny to listen to as opposed to reading the book. I don't know if Alex appears in the book because I didn't read the book.
I just made a note of that. That's interesting.
Yeah. I have a signed copy of the My Effing Life book from Geddy. And
Nice.
but if you listen to the audiobook, Alex jumps in, and it's kind of fun. And it's interesting to listen to Getty, talking in his own words. I love it when an author does that. It makes all the difference.
Yeah. Those two guys started a beer company too, huh?
Yeah. Did they start that beer company, or did they get paid to sponsor and issue some beers?
I thought they started it. I remember seeing the interview on it when they had it. And down in the Toronto distillery district. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. I just wish they'd tour one last time. But, I don't know. They're so old, and I know Alex has got arthritis. Moving on. And these are stories that make it fun. They bring, a musician, me knowing that Alex was suffering from arthritis and Neil Peart was suffering from, the pain of drumming, and there's a stage where you can't really do what, he was at a level that, it's a little hard to play those songs. But knowing those stories just made the fabric of my experience with them so much better. I'm sure a lot of other people. So give us a final pitch out as we go out. How can people on board with you? How can they reach out? Pitch your wares one last time and give us the .com.
Sure. And thanks, Chris. A couple of things first. These two books I've written are actually disguised legacy books because they're evergreen. They're on the the history, the background of some of the greatest music that shaped our lives and our cultures. So I think that's very important to know. The other thing to know about both these books, that they are reference books and they're in the library and archives at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in Cleveland now as well.
Yeah.
And they're available on Amazon worldwide. And the book's not about me. It's about us and the music we grew up with here in North America and in England, and how the world really was quite impacted, just by stuff that we did and that very big changes that we went through the 50s, 60s, and 70s. Music played a hell of a role in that, a hell of a role in it.
And some of the best music that was ever made, really, in my opinion. I can't stand what goes on nowadays, but I'm one of those old men screaming, "Get off my lawn," that sort of thing.
Well,
kids and your music nowadays.
I'll tell you one interesting story of how I came up with the second book. When I'm writing about the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and I've written about those areas, was via my son-in-law. And I'm talking to him, and he goes, geez, yeah, I remember. I think we're alone now. Yeah, I really like Tiffany's song. And I said, she's not the original. He says, what do you mean? So I walked over to my jukebox, hit a button, and I said, now, listen to Tommy James's Sean Dallas. Tommy wrote it. You might as well hear the original. So it gave me an idea. So in my book, I have a chapter called Good or Even Better. So what I do is I talk about a song from the 80s. That is big hit. But then it goes back who originally did it. And so at the end, when we have in the bottom in the QR codes where you can, put your smartphone and play them, I have both of them so you can compare the hits.
I like that. That's awesome because there were a lot of songs that I didn't know that weren't the originals. How
about You Keep Me Hanging On by the Supremes? Supremes. You got Vanilla Fudge, and then you had Kim Wilde from England doing it in '87. So there's another good example. So I have all three of them in that one.
Yeah, I think the Motley Crue did a song called "Smoking in the Boys' Room," and I remember hearing it. I was like, "That's kind of cool." And then I found the original "Smoking in the Boys' Room," which actually
Brownsville Station
kind of sounds better, actually, in my opinion.
Yeah.
It's just, I don't know, there's something more original to the fabric.
Yeah, and sometimes the originals, I'm a big fan of the originals. First and foremost, I will say that. But you'll get into situations you're going, geez, I like this cover version better. My good example is the Oak Ridge Boys doing Elvira. I love that song. I used to, I really did love it. But it was originally done by the writer, a guy named Dallas Frazier, who wrote that song in the mid-'60s. And he was on the pop charts with it. The Oak Ridge Boys were big, both on the pop charts and obviously number one in country. But so that's interesting. So we have both the codes here. That's good. But the story behind it's interesting because Fraser found that his push to do that song that inspired him was a sign in northeastern part of Nashville that had Elvira on it. So it actually comes from a sign, and they just made up the girl fictitiously.
Yeah. I mean, one other song that's kind of like that is George Thorogood, One Bourbon, One Scotch, One Beer. I heard that song a million times and had no idea it was originally done by John Lee Hooker. And
John Lee Hooker.
It was, yeah, and George changed it a bit too. He added a different thing to it. And I actually like both versions, but it depends on my mood. If I really want blues, I'm definitely going to go for John Lee Hooker and his version. And so, yeah, I mean, just crazy stuff. I mean,
that's the beauty of music, though. A good song passed the test of time, and the rendition, for the era works. You have one group here doing this, another group doing this. Like you got that heavy, say, Vanilla Fudge, take on a pop song, but from Motown. But it worked because the timing. Getting back to timing again was perfect.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for coming on the show. Give us the .com one last time as we go out.
Sure, it's mitstories.com. That MIT stands for Moments in Time. mitstories.com, and real accessible on Amazon. And right now, we think we're so wonderful in Canada. The goddamn Canada postal strike's killing us. So buy my book on Amazon if you're in the U.S. because I can't ship it to you right now.
Oh, gotta love that. Hopefully we'll all get along after.
It'll be all good.
Yep. Thanks for coming on the show. We really appreciate it, Tom.
Hey, Chris, thank you. I appreciate it. And keep doing what you're doing. I like what you're doing. You do it well, and do what you love what you do, and keep giving more than you promise.
Thank you. And thank you for coming on the show. Folks, order up his books wherever fine books are sold. Moments in Time, stories about artists and songs of the 50s, 60s, and 70s for fans of music from a music fan. I can't imagine a world without music, so check that out. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, linkedin.com/Chris Voss. Chris Voss won the TikTokity, and all those crazy places on the internet. I don't know what that means. Thanks for tuning in. Be good to each other. Stay safe. We'll see you next time for the rest of the story.
Good one.